Every time I read a list or watch a video talking about the best factions in professional wrestling history, it feels like they inevitably mention D-Generation X. They're not always in the top 3, but if there's a top 10, you're going to get DX mentioned. I've been thinking, do they really deserve that spot? Are they really one of the greatest factions in professional wrestling history?
I mean, they were very good, but they're not the greatest of all time.
And as I try to remember back on D-Generation X, I remember the good times. We all loved the crotch chop, right? Like, it was huge on every elementary and middle school and high school playground. Well, I guess not high school playground, but you get the idea. Every man, every woman, every boy, every girl from ages 8 to 18 were crotch chopping at their friends. And there were all of those bits, those moments of DX that we all fondly remember because they're good, they're fun, they're entertaining. But there's so much we don't want to remember. I mean, we have basically blocked out D-Generation X in the years 1999 and 2000, and they were still very much a thing then.
So while the group was very popular, probably one of the top 5 biggest groups in WWE history, there was a lot of stuff that we look back at, and when you look at it now, you realize it's really less over than most wrestling folklore would suggest that, I guess. You know, we all think it's a lot bigger, but really back then it wasn't as big as you thought. And that's kind of what we're going to go over here. We kind of went over it a little bit in the previous video when we talked about Triple H and how Triple H wasn't as big as you thought he was in 98, 99. I think the same thing goes for DX in 98, 99, and a little bit of 2000 as well.
Indeed, WWE has really rewrote the history on D-Generation X to make it seem like they were this huge generational faction that was breaking all the rules and was really popular. And they were popular, but they had moments. It was more moments than actual dominance. When you look at them compared to, say, even more recently, the Shield all went on to bigger and better things. Would anyone say a feud over the DX copyright with Kane involved was a big step up for Billy Gunn and X-Pac? Probably not.
What are you talking about?
You're going to get your deal done, and obviously you're in no position.
What are you talking about?
However, to fully understand how DX may be shaped by revisionist history, we have to start at the best place to start. That, of course, is the beginning, D-Generation X 1.0. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this wasn't transformative. Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Chyna, and occasionally Rick Rude was in there, but we forget about that. But I mean, he was there as well. They were a group that, I don't know if they changed professional wrestling, but as the bloom was starting to come off the NWO rose over in World Championship Wrestling, as that group continued to expand and become less cool, DX sort of filled that void of cool, slightly juvenile, just a group that was very relatable to just about every male ages 16 to 34 in America.
Yeah, they were definitely more of the younger crowd, I guess, at this point, because like you said, NWO had already been around. NWO came in summer of 96. We're now at the summer of 97 when DX really started with Triple H and Shawn Michaels. And really at the beginning too, they were kind of like, oh, we're friends, but we're not really friends. And then they finally have that promo where they're hanging out together. But that didn't happen for probably about 3 or 4 weeks. And it happened like after the SummerSlam in 97. But once that happened, and once Shawn Michaels really became the top guy, that was really where DX hit its apex, because you had Shawn Michaels. He was the top guy. He wasn't the champion just yet, but I mean, he was always in the WWF title hunt. He was up there. And then eventually he would win the belt due to the Montreal Screwjob, which we're not getting into. But these are the moments that are really Shawn Michaels moments more than they are DX moments.
Very true on that. And, you know, we look at that DX, that first go round, they did turn up the volume on the Attitude Era quite a bit. They really pushed the envelope, but it was really Shawn Michaels. He was the top guy. He was sort of the one who elevated the group into main event status, not just the Montreal Screwjob, but basically all throughout, you know, the end of 97 and the first part of 1998, DX was it was really hard to separate them from Shawn Michaels. I don't want to say they were Diesel-like, but in many ways, Shawn Michaels operated best when he had guys, or in Chyna's case, girls to play off of, to, do different things. So you had Chyna as the heavy, the muscle. Triple H was sort of the undercard guy who could eat a pin or two. And what was Rick Rude? I don't even remember that. Let's not focus on Rick Rude and DX.
No, because really, yeah, I mean, Rick Rude was around for maybe 2 months at most, because he's not even there. He leaves right after the screw job. So he's there maybe 2 months, and really all he does is hit a few people with chairs, and that's about it. So, I mean, he doesn't really do much. And yeah, like you said, Shawn Michaels is basically DX at this point. They are titled DX. They are titled as D-Generation X, but really it's Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna to a lesser extent, but it's mostly Shawn Michaels. And then you kind of have New Age Outlaws, but they're way out there at this point. They don't really come in until DX 2.0.
They're like affiliate members. They're kind of, but not really. But obviously this point in time when it comes to G-Generation X is always going to be remembered for Mike Tyson, because Mike Tyson, I guess sort of like the New Age Outlaws, becomes an affiliate member, and we obviously get the huge WrestleMania main event, and it's a big moment there, and it does get lumped into the DX history quite a bit, but it was really a Shawn Michaels thing. Let's not pretend that this had a lot to do with G-Generation X. He just happened to be in a faction, and they had a shirt, and Mike Tyson was wearing that shirt, and then there's a turn, and as we say, DX 1.0 is just so much wrapped around what Shawn Michaels is doing and his rise to champion and his holding the belt.
So yeah, like you said, it's really all Shawn Michaels, really everything revolving around him, doing whatever. Like, I mean, even the ridiculous match they have for the European title on Raw is essentially like the first time where you see DX kind of being DX, because they do goofy stuff, and then they have this match, and then Triple H wins the European title because they had to move the belt over to him for some reason. I don't know why. It was very dumb at that point, but that's kind of really where you see Triple H kind of becoming a bigger part of the group. And then obviously when Shawn Michaels gets injured at the Royal Rumble, Triple H has to become the main in-ring guy for the next 2 months, because Shawn Michaels can't really do much. And then once you get after WrestleMania, after Mike Tyson, you get Triple H all on his own, and that's when we get DX 2.0.
Oh, sorry. Were you talking? I just remembered the formation of DX 2.0, which begins with one of the most boring, unedgy D-Generation X promos ever. It's always just talked about what a huge moment this is, but it's very bait and switchy. It sucked. When Triple H comes to the ring and he's talking about,
I form the DX Army.
It's just that classic, really boring, really long-winded Triple H promo we would all learn to hate years later. And then he's like,
you look to the click.
And he's leading everyone on to think, well, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall might be coming back. And then he does the little thing, and it's X-Pac. And it just was like it was a fart in church. Like no one was really interested. And then X-Pac comes out and he spends a lot of time talking about mustard for some reason.
Saying I couldn't cut the mustard, to talk about anybody cutting any kind of mustard.
The crowd only pops when he's talking about WCW and Hulk Hogan, which, by the way, if AEW did this promo today, people would just absolutely attack them and brutalize them, because X-Pac spends a good amount of time talking about WCW by name and guys in WCW by name. And we know there's never going to be a payoff for that, because Kevin Nash and Scott Hall aren't coming. And it's just a lot of this promo is quiet, except for when he says Hulk Hogan, and that gets a pop.
Well, Hulk Hogan, you suck, pal.
And I mean, ultimately, X-Pac just closes the promo with this peach of a line.
And we're here to rip ass on the World Wrestling Federation.
You're gonna do what now? I mean, I could spend a lot of time talking about why this promo has been blown out of promotions by WWE in the history that has followed, but I don't know. Do you have anything to add about this? Am I just too sensitive or annoyed? Is just this me being too persnickety?
No, this is definitely a promo of the times where everybody was very insider. Let's mention WCW. Let's mention everybody's real name. Let's mention Eric Bischoff on WWF television because that's fun and cool. One of the funnier things, though, of this promo is when X-Pac is announced and he comes out and then JR just is blah, just completely just kills him as soon as he comes out.
Well, look who's back.
Cause yeah, he gives him the Todd Grisham, like, it's Christian.
Yeah, pretty much this is Christian here. He doesn't really care at all. He's kind of like, oh, geez, X-Pac's back. Oh my goodness, we got the dregs of WCW coming in now. And so really from that point, you can just really, if you're a viewer of this now, it's very hilarious. But if you were watching it then, I guess it'd be a big time deal because you're seeing somebody from WCW come over to WWF. And this is kind of the point where people in WWF also like to say this was the turning point because now, oh, we have a guy coming over from WCW back to WWF, even though he was a lower mid Carter in WCW who ate every single pin, and now he's coming into WWF to pretty much do the exact same thing again, be mid card at best and just take a lot of pins. But at least he's got like a little gimmick here, so that's nice. But yeah, just this whole promo at the beginning is just setting us up for not the best DX 2.0.
It's so un-Degeneration X-like because they spent the whole time with Hunter and Shawn and Chyna, and they were goofy and they were fighting against the man, and this just doesn't give off those vibes. Later on in that same episode of Raw, they do find 2 new recruits because Triple H is looking to build an army and he's looking for familiar faces or whatever. So we get the New Age Outlaws. They interrupt a cage match between Cactus Jack and whatever stupid gimmick they gave Terry Funk. Chainsaw Charlie that no one liked, just utterly pointless. But you don't really even know what the hell's going on, and because it's a cage match. So Triple H and X-Pac come out. You got the New Age Outlaws. It looks like maybe they're friendly, but no one knows what's going on.
Fuck this big spread eagle. What is going on here?
King and JR in commentary are kind of alluding to it, but they don't actually confirm it. The next Raw, we do get confirmation that the New Age Outlaws are the newest members of Degeneration X. So you've got 5 members. You have got an army.
Yeah, so this new version here is Triple H as the main guy, I guess now, with Chyna, the New Age Outlaws, and you have X-Pac. So it was more of a mid-card spectacle that never really fully captured that same top-tier status as the original lineup. They were given many out-of-the-ring segments, too, after the original setup here, which kind of, I guess, tried to help them out and tried to show they were more degenerate. And, oh, we're going to go out and we're going to have people crotch chop. And we're also going to do a lot of weird things, like when they went to Chinatown. There's a video there, which I don't think we can get into either because we might get demonetized for it. But there's a lot of weird things there that Hunter does that probably wouldn't be allowed to be replayed. But, you know, they tried to do this for about the first month or so because I don't think they really had an idea of what they wanted to do with DX. So they were just like, hey, let's do a bunch of videos of you guys giving crotch chops to people out in New York City, and we'll show that on Raw for the next month. And I mean, did they even really have a feud until June at that point? I don't think they really did much, but just kind of hang around.
It wasn't like this cohesive Degeneration X army just yet. A lot of it, as you say, they were kind of figuring out as they went along. They were originally supposed to be heels, but they do become popular. Like, let's give them credit there. They do become a very popular act. The DX army does, and it's some of it's funny, some of it's entertaining, some of it's really stupid, and it was stupid back in '98, and it's stupid now, but it's just it is what it is. To me, I think the best foil for Degeneration X was the corporation, much like in the first go around. Just having Triple H and the New Age Outlaws just go after Briscoe and the Stooges and Shane McMahon, that is where I think they could really shine, because you kind of wanted to see corporation fall to these shenanigans, these juvenile shenanigans. And that way it was good. Like, that is probably some of my fondest memories of D-Generation X, is just when they're messing with the corporation. And it's not good wrestling. There are no matches that matter here. It's all skits. And that's a big part of D-Generation X. It is the skits, like you say. It does lack that importance, right? They're always in the middle of Raw. They're always on pay-per-view undercards for the most part. I mean, we will get into that a little bit, where Triple H does rise a little bit up the card into semi-main events and stuff. But there isn't a lot there where you're like, this matters. This means something to WWE. A lot of what D-Generation X does, even in DX Army phase, you could have removed, and it wouldn't have dramatically altered the product.
No, really the best thing for DX, and I mean, like you said, the feud that they had with the corporation happens a little later in 98, but before that, the big thing that really helps them is the feud with the Nation of Domination. Unfortunately, though, a lot of their segments can't be replayed now because of all the offensive things that pretty much both groups did to each other. Of course, you have the time where DX dressed up as the Nation, which we're not going to get into because that's been debated about for years. The worst segment, though, that doesn't get replayed often or even talked about is a segment that they do a few weeks before SummerSlam. The Nation comes out, actually The Rock comes out, and then the Nation comes out later, but he brings out a ladder because he's talking about him and Triple H having a ladder match at SummerSlam, which is a great match. And then they bring out Chyna, and Chyna comes out, and Chyna's at this point, she can beat people up. She can beat any man up at this point. I mean, Chyna is getting over. People are behind her, but then the Nation comes out. So you got 5 dudes and 1 woman. And then it gets progressively worse. And I'm not going to talk more about it because this video will be demonetized, but you can go watch it for yourself. We'll put a little bit of it in the background, but we can't put any more because this will be demonetized. But pretty much the Nation DX feud is very good because it does give them more character. It definitely gets over the New Age Outlaws because, Billy Gunn and Road Dogg gets to talk a lot more. And that is really where Road Dogg gets over, is his promo work. Not really the matches that the Nation and DX have. Those aren't really too great, but definitely the promos and the segments that they do about each other definitely get them over, but not top tier level. They're just there, but they're not there yet. But at least they have something to do.
The Nation in DX feud is very complex, and I don't want to get back into reviewing a bunch of stuff through the lens of today. It doesn't really benefit anyone. But even at the time, some of this stuff was really bad, and some of this stuff someone should have said no. But it was also kind of that WWE mentality where, like, we got to keep pushing the envelope, even if it's doesn't need to be pushed. And you did get some stuff there, but as you say, this was a good feud between the Nation and DX. I think it probably does more for The Rock than anyone else, if we're being honest, because
totally
the Rock's about to go to the main event scene, and a lot of it had to do with his work here and finding that heel character. Also around that time, we should mention Shawn Michaels will eventually return and become the commissioner, and that becomes a whole thing, and that's part of the feud with the corporation with Shawn Michaels as commissioner.
I don't think they've heard the last of this. He's the commissioner.
The biggest feud DX had as the DX Army was against a foe that would never retaliate against him. There's never going to be a payoff. There's never going to be a match. And yet it is the singular DX feud WWE is fixated on. And that would be DX versus World Championship Wrestling.
So this pretty much, I guess, started because X-Pac mentioned them so often in his original promo.
Kevin Nash and Scott Hall would be standing right here with us.
That they just thought, hell, let's go with it. So about 2 weeks after that initial promo is when they do the tank, and they're going to invade WCW. I say tank with quotations because it's not actually a tank. It's more of a Jeep with a turret attached to it. And they're going maybe 2 miles an hour in a parking lot in Virginia. talking with WCW fans. It's a good idea on paper to get WCW fans to say, you know, I got free tickets to come here because a lot of people got free tickets to go to WCW back in those days. Not so much so, you know, after 98, you did have to pay, but there was a lot of times where WCW would give out free tickets. But WWF also gave away free tickets as well. I'll tell you that much, because they were not drawing as much as you think at that point either. But it was a good idea on paper. Where it gets ridiculous is when they drive the tank down, you know, into, I don't even know where it was, some sort of basement garage underneath. We don't even know if they're under the arena either. The only reason why this is happening is because WWF and WCW are both within about 60 miles or so in Virginia. Same night they're doing shows. So that's the reason why WWF sent DX there. But this whole thing is just is ridiculous. That's why I'm going all over the place, because it's just ridiculous, the whole thing. And it just gets completely overblown now because we think it's some big deal when in actuality it really didn't do all that much.
I think it was Kevin Nash. It was either Eric Bischoff or Kevin Nash who was like talking about it. And they said, we should have just let them in, because what were they really going to do? It's not like they were going to shoot on the entire WCW roster. But what would have happened is if they were filming that on WWF television, is that you would essentially be giving WCW free publicity. And maybe people would even have turned over to WCW to see how they were reacting to it. So that always felt like one of the great missed opportunities. But as you said, it didn't mean anything. And I think that comes with a lot of the DX Army stuff, but especially with the WCW, they were really throwaway filler segments on most episodes of Raw. Fun, absolutely. Entertaining, you betcha, but ultimately quite meaningless in the grand scheme of things.
So I mentioned the tank story and how ridiculous it is, and it's a good story to mention now. And you know, WWF or WWE can edit it to where it looked cool, but it's really grossly embellished. Really, DX was overshadowed by bigger stars that were breaking out now. Obviously, Austin was already broken out by 98, but The Rock is really who breaks out at this point. Right after the loss to Triple H at SummerSlam, The Rock breaks away from the nation and he becomes The Rock for 2 or 3 months, where The Rock's getting some big ovations and he's going to be a face. He would eventually turn back heel, but he was a face there for about 2 months or so. And DX is like maybe third or fourth wheel at this point. They keep getting bumped to the back of the bus here because you got Taker, you got Austin, you got The Rock, you got a lot of things going on here. DX is kind of just, like you said, filler with a lot of their segments and a lot of the things that they do.
Yeah, and occasionally they would sort of glom on to like a higher up the card feud. Like they are obviously there when Mankind wins the championship, but they had no purpose being there. That didn't make any sense. But it was like, well, we're kind of anti-authority, so we're gonna help Mankind win the title. But a lot of that is, if they were higher up on the card, it's because they'd glommed onto what someone else was doing, which is kind of not cool when you think about it. But that was just sort of DX's role, right? They were kind of just whatever was needed. They could come in and fill a need. If you needed to kill a segment doing something entertaining or juvenile, or if you needed them to feud with someone, they really had a nebulous role in 98. Some of it was entertaining, but a lot of it has been made into bigger things than they really were. They had their fans. You do see DX merch. It's kind of a thing, but it's not that level of Austin, Undertaker, Mankind. They just aren't at that level. They are somewhere between that and the oddities on the level of the card of WWE.
Much higher than the oddities, though.
sorry. Yeah, that's a bad comparison. Like the oddities, there, DX was way better than the oddities. We can all agree about that. The DX Army continues on until the first Raw of 1999, and this ends up being the beginning of what is a very long and slow and boring end for the group. So Shawn Michaels has been commissioner for a while now, but he has some sort of falling out with Vince McMahon, and he comes out and he announces he's joining D-Generation X, and the pop this gets is so it's what everybody had been wanting for the longest time. The DX Army was fine, but that Shawn Michaels DX was just the itch everyone had and they wanted to scratch. So even though Shawn wasn't wrestling, just the idea, the premise that he was going to be around as this thorn in Vince McMahon's side, and he had Triple H and he had X-Pac and he had the New Age Outlaws to help him carry out this mission. Even now, I'm kind of like, wow, like we could be on to something here, guys. I think just might be something WWE, well, Shawn Michaels' body in WWE had other plans. It turns out Shawn Michaels needed back surgery and he was going to be off TV for a while. So all of the excitement, all of the buzz of a truly united, reformed, strong, complete unit of D-Generation X is never realized, because later in the night, this, by the way, same episode of Raw where Terry Reynolds has a miscarriage, like this is in between those segments. So like you have Shawn Michaels joining DX, and then you have Terry Reynolds' miscarriage, and then you have one of the more unfortunate moments. It's super confusing. DX is having a scrum or whatever, and Shawn Michaels is there, and he's like, see you later, Hunter. And then Hunter's like, maybe you will, maybe you won't. And he gets locked out of the arena and he's attacked by the corporation. It felt like this was probably an angle that was supposed to go somewhere, and Shawn Michaels' back surgery and other issues meant it didn't really go anywhere, but it was just really confusing, and it sets up a pattern of really confusing booking for D-Generation X that has just been entirely scrubbed from their history. So they start feuding with one another, and then they get back together and rinse and repeat, and we do it all again. And for the better part of 2 years, this is what D-Generation X becomes, and it is what nobody wanted. Even the most ardent fans of the DX Army phase just wanted them to be together, doing their shtick, having fun, and we never really got that for an extended period of time. It was either Triple H is in the corporation and Kane's fighting over someone, and then Chyna's joining someone, and then Billy Gunn and X-Pac have a beef, and they're just always bickering with one another. But they could never separate it cleanly from one another. So there's just these extended feuds, and then somehow they link up again, and we get that brief, fleeting moment of like, all right, DX is back, and then they aren't back. And I mean, in 2000, Billy Gunn gets injured. So it's such a mess, but it's so unfun. It's so uncool. It's the antithesis of everything D-Generation X stood for.
Yeah. I mean, the last that whole thing with Shawn Michaels at the end there, where they lock him out, and then Shawn's like, oh, you guys locked me out again. And, and then he gets beaten up, and it's like, was that set up by DX? And then they didn't even go into it, because then they just go into Mankind, winning the title with the help of DX. And then DX is holding him up. So you're like, okay, so are DX faces now? But then they just let Shawn Michaels die. Like, I mean, Shawn Michaels is dead. Like his face is in the windshield with blood everywhere. Like you would think he is dead.
It is one of WWE's best like mystery attacker angles, because they lead you to believe like he is like messed up, and I mean they make it look like a real crime scene. So yeah, this was supposed to be serious, and they mentioned on commentary it was like the corporation, and King gives some like really vague hints like, could it be somebody else?
Yeah,
it was a really bizarre sort of thinking. It wasn't what anyone wanted. Like fans didn't want that, and I get Shawn Michaels needed back surgery, but why have him join DX in the first place? Why give us that just moment of hope? It was a hope spot, and they took it away so quickly.
That was what they were very good with, was doing these one show kind of angles. That angle, or there was another one back, I believe, in the summer of '98, just before like SummerSlam, where they're all like, "Oh, are we going to break up?" And they come to the ring, and they're like, they start fighting in the ring.
You're a jack off. He's a jack off. You're a jack off.
And then they moon the crowd, and they're like, oh, we're back together. We're friends again. And it's like, oh, did we need to waste 20 minutes of the show to do this? No, we didn't. That was a lot of DX was they were time wasters. It felt like towards the end of '98. It was only like a year in where it just kind of felt like, oh, it's DX. Okay, Road Dogg does his shtick. We all repeat. And then, Triple H does his thing. And we all say, we all do our crotch chop and we move on. They have a match and then rinse and repeat. That's all they do. And it's like you said, they just rinse and repeat. They do the same things over and over again where they're going to break up, but then they don't. Are they going to feud with each other and then they don't? And then they're teaming with each other and then they hate each other. And then the weirdest thing, I guess, is when, Billy Gunn gets pushed and then he doesn't get pushed and then Road Dogg gets pushed above him. And it's like, then Billy Gunn is now the hardcore champion. And then you got Road Dogg being the Intercontinental champion. And, people to this day are still wondering, why did they switch, Road Dogg as the hardcore champion to the Intercontinental champion? And then you put Billy Gunn down at the hardcore champion instead of Intercontinental. And it doesn't make any sense to this day. And it doesn't really matter because I don't think it ever went anywhere anyway, because Road Dogg ends up having to leave for 2 months due to rehab. So it was very wonky booking, and it really didn't have to be, because DX, you always had a constant going on. You always had a constant flow of guys. Triple H was always around, even when he was injured. He always had a cast on with a crutch. I have a feeling like half of 98, he was injured with a crutch because he hit Owen Hart with a crutch at least 6 times, on pay-per-views and Raw. So it felt like he was injured the entire time, yet he was always on television. So I don't know why they couldn't have done more than the "we're going to break up, no, we're not," angles with DX. They did that way too often. And then really the peak was did they attack Shawn Michaels or not? Because it was stupid. It made no sense. And then it started the whole downfall of DX, where Chyna joins the corporation, and then Triple H is fighting with Kane, and then it's madness. It's all madness, and it really didn't have to be madness. It really just turned into kind of what the NWO turned into, just a whole lot faster, and I guess it made a little more sense than the NWO, even though I don't know if it did.
Yeah, I mean, you could go either way there. And like the NWO, there would be a revival. We'll get into that in a second. But I do want to talk about Chyna's role a little bit, because going back and watching some of this, or watching a lot of it actually, I came back thinking like, wow, Chyna was sort of the glue here, and she doesn't get enough credit for what she brought to the group as the heavy, as sort of the straight, I don't want to say straight man, but as sort of the straight person comedically, just being able to add a sense of levity there, being a badass. And in 1.0 and during the DX Army, and obviously she gets sort of lost in the shuffle of DX 3.0, which everyone does.
Yeah.
But Chyna's role here it's a really entertaining addition, and I think she made the group probably a little better than it was. Like, if she wasn't around, I don't know if it's as good. And really, she was arguably probably as credible a threat as a wrestler as Road Dogg was. I mean, no disrespect to Road Dogg, but he did have a huge amount of stuff in his repertoire. And I mean, they really did a good job of making Chyna seem like this serious threat for DX, making sure she wasn't just arm candy in an era where women in professional wrestling were arm candy when they were property. Thank you, Vince Russo. And I did go back and just think about like, man, like, Chyna was really, really good in DX, and I don't think she gets enough credit for her role in the group.
Totally. Yeah, she was, like you said, the glue. I don't know if I think the first iteration of DX would have worked without her, but she definitely helped make them more. I don't even know if give them more mystery is a good term for it, but she definitely gave them more, for you to think about, because she was always out there, but you didn't know how powerful she was for the first couple of weeks until you saw her hit dudes with chairs. I think she hit The Undertaker with a chair, and that was when everyone was like, oh man, she hit The Undertaker with a chair. Like, that was crazy. I think she body slams Mankind in a match, which was also crazy because Mankind's like nearly 300 pounds, and you have this woman just body slamming him on the floor. So once she started to do that, that's really where she started to put more character into herself, and more of a don't mess with her, even though these other two guys might be goofs. She's someone you don't want to screw around with. So that was kind of helpful, because they tried to do that with Rick Rude, but Rick Rude didn't really care at all. So that's why it kind of gets forgotten as well, because Rick Rude just didn't really care. He didn't want to be there. But so Chyna did definitely help, and she definitely helps in the 2.0 version, because like you said, she is more of a comedy character, not to a negative, I guess. She's not a negative at all in the way she does comedy. She's very funny, actually, because she's so deadpan, and she's so just like, I want to be the straight man here. I'm not gonna do goofy stuff like these other idiots are doing. There is a time where they do a segment out on the street and she's speaking other languages to people, and that's when you realize, oh my god, this woman knows how to speak like 5 different languages, and she can also kill you. So it's like, she did add a lot to the group, and it was unfortunate after I guess mid 99, where she kind of just got, she has to go kind of on her own, because they can't do anything more with her.
When I went back and was watching a lot of this DX stuff, she really is kind of the low-key star of this, because you know what you're going to get with Road Dogg. You know what you're going to get with Billy Gunn. They were all playing the same notes. They were playing the same song. And yeah, it worked sometimes, and sometimes it got a little old. But with Chyna there, they could tinker with it. They could do different things there, even in matches where it's like, how's she going to interfere? They were constantly changing that up. So it kind of just kept them a little fresher. But we've talked about DX 1.0, the Shawn Michaels era. We've talked about DX 2.0, the Army era. We've talked about 3.0, just the era no one ever talks about, because it was like a bunch of will they, won't they, Sam and Diane bullshit. But we got to talk about the reunion in 06, because this is where they kind of completely rewrite the story of DX in those early years and turn it into a merchandise powerhouse that was, I don't want to nag on it too much, because I get it wasn't for me. For a lot of us DX fans or people who grew up with DX, the reunion wasn't for us. And even though we watched it and wanted it to be for us, it was for the 13-year-olds who were going to buy glow sticks and foam fingers and all of that other crap. And in that regard, it was successful. But every other aspect of it, like, oh man.
Even Shawn Michaels says it. They're like, old dads going out there trying to be cool. And that's essentially what they were. For the first few, I guess, weeks, I was going to say first few months, but really, it goes on way too long by that point. It kind of peters out as well, because they don't really have a feud with each other. They just kind of are like, we're going to do different things. And then they just kind of don't be DX anymore. But at the beginning, I guess it was kind of cool, because we were all looking to see what, wacky stuff they would do, and what PG-13 stuff they would do. But since this was the PG era, everything had to be very dialed back, so they weren't going to do anything that they did in 1998, because they couldn't. So you had to do goofy stuff. You had to do stuff with little people. You had to do stuff with Hornswoggle or the oily fat guy, or I don't know. Did they have any other random characters show up? I just remember those few guys.
They were always having very uncomfortable interactions with Crime Time. I know. I remember those were not fun to watch.
No, yes. Okay. Yes. I remember. Those are always very weird. I believe it was very weird because Shawn Michaels always made it weird. He always made it weird. And I don't know if there's something there. I don't want to get into it, but he always made it a little bit weird. Basically, really what that was set up for was so that they could do DX versus the McMahons. And they did that, 3 or 4 times on pay-per-view before they kind of let that go. They did the Hell in the Cell match with DX versus the McMahons and Big Show, because they had to put someone in that match. So why not bring Big Show involved in this? So yeah, it did get a little out of control. The segments were not nearly as fun or as cool, and they usually went on way too long. Like that one segment where they do the court. What was that courtroom one where they do with Hornswoggle? Yeah, the Little People's Court. That went on for probably 25 minutes or so. It went on way too long. And this was in the I think they were still doing 2-hour Raws at this point. Or maybe they were doing 3-hour Raw.
In fairness, there wasn't a lot happening in 2010 on Raw.
I mean, yeah, true. But come on, I don't want to watch a 25-minute long segment here. And it just went on forever. And all it was at the end was they were trying to promote their DVD. which, okay, we were going to buy it anyway, so it doesn't matter. So yeah, really the 2008 version was them trying to rewrite all of their wrongs from back in the day. They edited all the videos down to make them look cool and fun, when in actuality, they really weren't. And, if you watch their 98 stuff now in full, not the edited segment, if you watch all their stuff in full, you will be very bored or not wanting to watch anymore past about 10 minutes, because it gets kind of boring and it's the same crotch chopping, them doing stupid, wacky voices, or them doing something that's probably not going to fly now.
No, not at all. And I mean, that gets us back to what we mentioned at the start of the video, that history of D-Generation X has really been boiled down into highlights and moments. And those moments have been strung together to lead you to believe this was one of the greatest factions to have ever laced up the boots in WWE, WWF, and any other wrestling promotion out there. And I mean, I just don't know if it was that. It was kind of that fun comedy throwaway say. Like, a lot of what DX did were throwaway segments, or it was Road Dogg killing 2 minutes to get to a commercial break. And I mean, like I said, I do have a certain fondness for it. I do think that there were moments that even to this day I find entertaining, but I think we just need to be honest here. And the legacy of D-Generation X isn't what WWE sells us now. It is a feud against a rival promotion that had zero payoffs, and they talk about it like it's this huge thing that settled the Monday Night War, and it didn't do that. And it's really uncomfortable segments with the Nation of Domination that saw The Rock get over, but not really D-Generation X. And mostly it's just that period in 1999 and 2000 that no one ever talks about, where, like, we have to have Kane. Is Kane a member? And X-Pac's Kane's friend. And Chyna's in the corporation. And now Triple H is in the corporation. And now he's not. And now Road Dogg and Billy Gunn are switching belts. And it was just, that is the longest core group of DX. That Shawn Michaels era is, what, 8 months?
6 months. Yeah. 8 months. Yeah.
That DX Army phase, that goes maybe 9 months. It starts after WrestleMania, but by that first Raw in 99, it's Shawn Michaels joining us. And then, well, I think we might have possibly betrayed him. Maybe no one ever knows and ever finds out. And then, yeah, you get into 99 and 2000 and it's just a wash with nothing. And then in 2006, they've kind of just revised what DX was, because it's part of that, well, everyone has attitude era nostalgia, but we're actually going to sell that nostalgia to the kids who weren't there, because they're going to think it's cool. They're going to think the crotch chop's cool. And all of this, like, kind of edgy in 2006 and 2007 stuff was actually very mundane and passe in 98. But I don't know. I mean, when you look at DX and you look at the entire history, what are your thoughts on them?
Honest opinion is it's a very good faction, but not nearly as big as you think. Some iterations of it were bigger than others. They have definitely rewritten the history of DX, almost like how we mentioned how they have revised the history of Triple H. They have also revised the history of DX because Triple H is associated with it. So I think that all leads back to that as well. The revision of DX, that they switched the tide from WCW to WWF, is not true at all. Austin did that with the Austin McMahon match that happened on Raw like 2 weeks after WrestleMania 14. They have that. They're not even going to have a match, but Austin gets his arm tied behind his back, and then everyone switched from Nitro to watch that, and pretty much that's where it started. DX just kind of, they just kind of ride parallel to that all the way up to the top. They didn't really do all that much to help it. They just kind of rode the wave up there, and then it just got really insane towards the end. And that's what I think gets forgotten, is that the insane end of DX, where they're friends, they're not friends, and then they join the McMahon Helmsley faction, and we get another DX reunion minus Chyna in 2000, even though Chyna's still there, but she's not friends with them because she can't be friends. It's just it's all not good. And I guess it's good that they have revised history to make it seem better than it was.
At the end of the day, when it comes to the legacy of D-Generation X, it does lead back to that moment where they invade Nitro, but I kind of have always felt, why were they in Nitro in the first place? If D-Generation X were truly important, truly stars, it would have been wrestling on the WWE show and not playing around on a Jeep in Virginia.
That is totally true. And that's all we want to say in this video. So thank you so much for hanging out with us here on Special Guest Ref. You can check out Cheyenne on the Touchback. You can check out me on Wrong Sports. Links are also in the description below. Also, please check out previous videos that we have in the playlist. We keep mentioning that one about Triple H because we do talk a lot about the Triple H rise in 98, 99, and 2000. We don't really mention it too much in here because we talk about it in length in that other video. So please check that out. And again, this is Special Guest Ref. So thank you so much. And just a reminder,
if Chyna is your special guest referee and you're facing one of the members of D-Generation X, look out for the low blow because it's coming and possibly on multiple occasions.